Hi there, this is Saltine from Saltine Films, and welcome to part 4 of my favourite 150 films, not ranked, because that would be ridiculous. So I'm just going to go through another 15 films, and again, please leave comments below what you think of these films, and what 15 films you would have, or list your entire top 150 if you're that way inclined. So you'll be pleased to know there's no 28 different versions of these films I'm going to show you. It's just one version per film this time. Again, not ranked, but let's make a start. First one is The Jungle Book by Walt Disney. This is the lovely Mondo Steelbook. I love tigers and I love George Sanders, so The Jungle Book has always been my favourite Disney film. Might not be the best Disney film, but it's my favourite film, Disney film. It's only 76 minutes long, and I do have a couple of gripes with it. One, Shere Khan doesn't kill Mowgli. I think that should have been the proper ending, because Mowgli is a bit annoying, let's be honest, and he deserves to die in the jaws of a killing machine. And also Mowgli chooses humanity over being able to talk to animals and have like a black panther and a bear as your pals. He chooses humanity. It's like, that just doesn't ring true. If I could live in a jungle with talking animals, I mean, come on, that's way better than having a job and paying tax. You know, it's crazy. It's got great songs. George Sanders just dominates the film as Shere Khan. It's just wonderful, and it's always been one of my favourites, and always will be. And also, when you think Baloo the bear's dead, that is way worse than Bambi's mother getting killed. I mean, we don't even see Bambi's mother getting killed. When you think Baloo's dead, that's devastating. If Shere Khan had like disemboweled and eaten Mowgli, I wouldn't really be that upset. Next on the list is The Killer by John Woo. This is the Nova Media Blu-ray, which is multi-region, if you're thinking about buying it. This is the film that kind of sums up John Woo for me. Again, you can argue Better Tomorrow 2 or Hard Boiled perhaps. Obviously when he came to Hollywood, he wasn't actually allowed to do the stuff that made him famous. Sorry, as the place falls apart. He wasn't really allowed to do his bullet ballet. It's the classic Hollywood thing of, oh, we love what you do as a director, but we're not actually going to let you do what you do best. Again, it has the homoerotic undertones that all these Hong Kong films have. It just has ridiculous ballistics. It's about honour and identity, and trust, betrayal, and it's just awesome. Chow Yun-fat as his charismatic best, and Danny Lee gives wonderful support. It's still breathtaking and jaw-dropping. Speaking of jaw-dropping, it's Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain from 1973? 1973? I might be wrong with 1973. Obviously, we're all waiting for the Arrow box set to come out. I think I pre-ordered it in December and it keeps getting delayed. I'm sure it must be about the animal stuff, the animal death in it. But I kind of feel like you've just got to make it an 18, put a warning on it. Because to have kind of cut versions, what is 1973? To have cut versions, there's no point releasing them or having blurred bits. Yes, there's animal deaths in it, but that was just kind of the time. So just have a big 18 and a big warning, and please release them, because and let them go. El Topo kind of gets all the credit as far as, you know, the classic midnight movie, but Holy Mountain for me is the better film. It's still nuts. It's still about the spiritual and the supernatural and astrology and all these things that you probably won't get every single reference. I know I don't. But the ending of the Holy Mountain, which I'm not going to spoil, but I would love to spoil, but I'm not going to spoil, for me is just one of the, not only the greatest endings in cinema history, but one of the greatest statements about cinema itself, which is pretty hard to do. It's just an amazing statement on what cinema actually is, and it has a great ending as well. It's about a journey of these disciples to find truth, but again, to try and explain it is like a losing battle. If you haven't seen it, just watch it. I remember there was a showing on the GFT in Glasgow when I actually went to the cinema, and I took some colleagues from work who had never seen any Jodorowsky, and they were just blown away by it in one way or another, because it is, again, it's just one of those films that's an experience. Whether you like Jodorowsky or not, whether you think his films make sense or they don't, he certainly shows you kind of visual tableaus and little things that you've generally just never seen before. He's kind of like, Takashi Miike's got a little bit of Jodorowsky in him, in the sense of, even if his film's not the best, he will show you stuff that you've just never seen before, for better or worse. So that's the Holy Mountain. Hopefully coming soon to the Arrow box set. I think its release date's now August 20. Next is Barry Levinson's The Natural. Now this is pure Hollywood corn, but when Hollywood gets the corn right, it's golden corn. Now John Sayles, who obviously I love, has always said if he had directed The Natural, it would be Nick Nolte rather than Robert Redford, and he would have struck out at the end, because in the book he strikes out at the end, whereas obviously in the spoilers, but it's The Natural, you should have seen The Natural by now, obviously it hits a home run at the end. And normally I prefer endings that are more realistic, but this isn't a realistic film. This is a film about myth making. It's about heroes, and we all know that the reality of heroes and of myths are kind of far from the actual truth. But I just adore this film. It's got an amazing cast, co-written by Roger Town, who, Kim Basinger, Robert Duvall, Glenn Close, Joe Don Baker, Robert Prosky, Richard Farnsworth, Thingamajigger. Thingamajigger from The Thing. I've completely blanked on Thingamajigger from The Thing. Who plays the coach. It's Again, it's just pure Hollywood corn, but it's just awesome. Watch this in a double bill with Sales 8 Men Out. Really gets the period right. It's a film I could watch. Wilford Brimley. It's a film I could watch like every day. Next is Criterion Spine number 486. It's David Mamet's Homicide, which for me is Mamet's greatest achievement in the film world. It's one of the best American films in the 90s, from 91, and it's just one of the greatest films on American race and race relations ever. It's full of that awesome David Mamet dialogue. It stars Joe Mantegna as a Jewish cop who gets brought in to investigate shots fired at a Jewish house, and also he gets reeled into the murder of an old woman, an old Jewish woman who runs a shop. Because he's Jewish, he gets pulled into it, but he doesn't really have an identity. And through the events of the film, he actually kind of realises who he is and what his identity is. And then he pushes and crosses lines that he shouldn't be crossing, depending on where your loyalty is to who you are or what your job is. It's got a bunch of Mamet regulars, including William H. Macy before he was famous. Obviously he'd appeared in Things Change before this, and he would appear in Oleana, the film version. It's just a stunning film. Ving Rhames is in it as well. It's just amazing. Again, talking about it excuse me, can't really do it justice. It's just a blistering film. And again, it's got another devastating ending. And again, I'm not going to go into spoilers. It's just so good. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. And I know Criterion recently upgraded House of Games from DVD to Blu-ray, but Homicide is one they need to upgrade as well, because Homicide's probably the more important film, as much as I enjoy House of Games, which is fantastic as well. But Homicide's the more important film, and it's just wonderful. Again, if you're not used to Mamet's dialogue, it can seem, the delivery can always seem a little bit odd, but it's fantastic. Speaking of fantastic, Ed Wood by Tim Burton. Tim Burton's masterpiece, in my opinion. Tells the story of Ed Wood, the famous filmmaker for making bad films. Johnny Depp in his best performance. Martin Landau in one of his best performances, Bela Lugosi. Sarah Jessica Parker, Patricia Arquette, Jeffrey Jones, Bill Murray. Music by Howard Shore. Not Danny Elfman, thank goodness. It's a biopic. It's one of the best biopics because you can tell that Tim Burton has a love for the subject matter. We're not really laughing at Ed Wood. There's a great scene where he meets Orson Welles, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, I believe. It's just a stunning film. It's shot in black and white. It's beautiful. Again, Tim Burton's not laughing at Ed Wood, and we, the audience, shouldn't be laughing at him either, because this is a guy who wanted to follow his dreams and make movies. It just so happens he didn't have that much talent. But to be honest, I'd rather watch an Ed Wood film than some of the mainstream films of today. Plan 9 from Outer Space is a tremendous viewing experience. It's just, you can tell Tim Burton's love of the subject, which in his later films you can't really say that. You do feel a lot of his later work is just Tim Burton by the numbers. But this is about a Hollywood era that perhaps doesn't get talked about, a Hollywood area that doesn't get talked about. Obviously Bela Lugosi at the end of his life was desperate to work. He'd become like a morphine addict. There's some really heartbreaking scenes with him. It's a film with a heart. Again, it's not just an empty biopic laughing at the subject. There's a lot of heart in the film, and I think, again, that's something that's missing from a lot of Tim Burton's work. Yeah, it's just a marvellous film, and again, it's probably the Tim Burton film that's been seen the least, because it's probably in black and white, and because it's actually a serious film, even though it's very funny as well. Yeah, if you haven't seen Ed Wood, do yourself a favour, and you should be able to buy it really cheap. And it is a truly great film. Speaking of truly great films, for me anyway, Spy Number 670, Ernst Lubitsch, 1942, To Be or Not to Be. I can't really watch the Mel Brooks remake, even though it's apparently decent, but I can't watch it because Carol Lombard's not in it. This was made in 1942, and it's about a group of Polish actors pretending to be Nazis to get out of Poland, basically. It features Robert Stack in a serious role, not really. Jack Benny and the wonderful Carol Lombard in, sadly, her last film role. I did do a video of top 10 cinema tragedies, and I think Carol Lombard was number 3 maybe. Even though I might have to, if I revisit that list, she might be higher. Yeah, her career was sadly cut short by a plane crash, even though they were going to take the train. The film is Lubitsch at his best. The script is just wonderfully zingy. The relationship between Carol Lombard and her husband and her admirer Robert Stack is just hilarious. It has, dark undertones. It was made in 1942. But it's just so funny. It's Lubitsch. It's right up there with Shop Around the Corner, Ninotchka, Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, Designed for Living, Trouble in Paradise, as just the cream of Lubitsch, which sounds like a soup, but just a fantastic film. You're best to go into it blind. It's just fantastic. It's just fantastic. I'm sorry. Next, it's another Criterion. Spy Number 335, Elevator to the Gallows, or Lift to the Scaffold, as I always tend to call it. Made in 1958. This is Louis Malle's first film. He made this at the age of 24. What were you doing at the age of 24? I certainly wasn't making one of the quintessential French jazzy midnight romantic tragic thrillers of the 1950s, because Louis Malle was making it. Starring Jean Moreau and Maurice Ronay, who would appear in more Louis Malle films. This is just stunning. Again, it's funny how many of these films on my top 150 have wonderful endings, but Elevator to the Gallows has a spectacular but understated ending. as Moreau and Ronay star as two lovers who want to get rid of Moreau's husband. Again, I'm not going to tell you much about the plot. Miles Davis did the score. It's one of those films that's just quintessentially French, quintessentially 50s, 60s French films. You know, if you're making a top 20 list of those films, then Elevator to the Gallows, Lift to the Scaffold is on that list. It's just sublime. It just evokes a mood and a period. It's just, again, plot wise, there's not that much to the plot, but again, like so many of those French films of the 50s and 60s, just the feel and the vibe of the film is just exquisite. And again, it's one of the greatest debuts of all time. Next, it's another Criterion, just coincidence. Spy number 459, Brunel's The Exterminating Angel from 1962. This was before The Sweet Charm of Bourgeoisie, but it's a kind of similar setup. Instead of not being able to get dinner, this one is a bunch of middle class bourgeois people at a dinner party, but they can't leave the room. And again, for modern audiences, this might be a little bit strange, but again, there's no explanation. Imagine that, films that don't have explanations about things. It's crazy. Again, not a lot of plot, just a bunch of characters trapped in a room and resorting to various methods to survive. Again, it's a satire on the middle classes, satire on the bourgeoisie. It's a black comedy. Again, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it, but the ending again has the typical Brunel sense of humour. It's just an absolute joy. But I'm not going to tell you much about it. But next, it's Passion Fish by John Sayles. I know I'm biased, but there's a reason for it, because he's fantastic. He is the greatest American writer-director of the last 40 years, in my opinion. This was written, directed and edited by him. This is arguably my favourite Sayles film, but again, the thing with Sayles is whichever one you just watch last is generally your favourite. Again, as you can see, this is just a DVD, and it's even a flip DVD. I think one of them's got a widescreen and one's got the pan and scan. So again, Criterion, you've done a great job releasing Mate One. Let's release some more Sayles, please. Passion Fish is just amazing, but again, with quite a lot of Sayles work. The synopsis isn't that attractive. It's a soap opera actress, played by Mary McDonnell, who is paralysed and comes home to her Louisiana home on the bayou, and she has a series of home helps which she tears through until Alfred Woodard turns up, and it's just the relationship that they form. And then there's the old flame that she had in high school, David Strathairn, who turns up. Again, that's not going to sell tickets at the multiplex, but it's such a beautiful film, and I know I'm biased, but God, it's fantastic. Roger Deakins shot it. I mean, Mary McDonnell got an Oscar nomination. Alfred Woodard should have got an Oscar nomination as well. Again, it's a Sayles film that doesn't sound great, but it's funny. it's moving, but everything's earned. And again, Sales just writes characters that you want to spend time with, and that is one of the flaws of the film. It's only 135 minutes long, and it should have been about 6 hours long, because you want to follow these characters pretty much for the rest of their lives, to be honest. And that's why Sales is just so great, because he can write for anybody, and he makes you want, when the credits roll at the end of the film, yes, you've seen one of the greatest films you'll ever see in your life, but you want more. You want to follow these two characters as they go through their lives, because he just writes so well. So again, it's a film that's not going to sell tickets. It's a film that you're perhaps going to be a little bit, you're not going to immediately grab it off the shelf to watch, but you should, because it's fantastic. Again, I'll go back to, I think it was a Time Out review, it might have been Jeff Andrew, I'm not quite sure, who said that Passion Fish was effortlessly superior filmmaking. And again, when you watch a Sales film, you will find yourself going, why aren't all films written this well? And it's because they're not written by John Sayles. His characters speak dialogue. There's no kind of dialogue that come out of characters' mouth that you just go, oh, that doesn't sound right. Or why would you have that line in? And there's a reason why Sayles doesn't let anybody change his dialogue. You hear directors ad-libbing, or letting actors just make stuff up. It's like Sayles is like, as Chris Cooper says in the extras to Matewan, if an actor tries to change the dialogue or change the script, Sayles will have a word with him. And it's like, you don't change it. Same with Hal Hartley, the other wonderful independent director. Adrienne Shelley used to say she would go on to other films and actors would be like changing the dialogue, and she would just be like, this is so foreign, because Hal Hartley does not let you change a comma. And it's the same with Sayles. As Maggie Renzi, his longtime partner and producer, always says, it's like, an actor's job's hard enough, so why would you want them to also write the script? And when you have Sayles, why would you even think about changing dialogue? Rant over, go watch Passion Fish, and come back to me and tell you what you think of it. And if you don't like it, I'll give you my money back. Next is another Criterion. It's spine number 306. It's Le Samurai. I've already done the Armée d'Ombre, or Army of Shadows, which is a masterpiece, and Le Samurai is a masterpiece too. From 1967, starring Alain Delon. Inspired so many films with lone assassins, from Leon, you could argue Taxi Driver, and so many others. It's just another beautiful Melville film. The greys and the blues, muted colours. I'm not even going to mention the plot, because again, there's not really much in the plot. It's just how it's mounted. It's cool as custard. It's just an essential, again, another essential French film. It's just done. Not much to say about Le Samurai, apart from it's another film that's literally perfect. Next, The Long Good Friday, with a career-defining performance by Bob Hoskins. Made in 1980. It's another film that is just endlessly quotable, with a great cast. Early Helen Mirren. It's just wonderful. It's funny. Again, strange enough, it's got a wonderful ending. Again, this just must be a coincidence. This is the Arrow release. Again, you can pick this up really cheaply. It's just a stunning film about this gangster in London who has grand aspirations of taking over, rebuilding London, controlling London, but he gets into trouble with IRA, and his grand plan, where he has an American investor from the mafia coming over, it all kind of falls apart in front of him as his empire crumbles. It's just so good. Yes, the score has perhaps aged it a little, but Bob Hoskins' performance is just, he's like a little terrier. He's like a little bulldog. He's just fantastic. Yeah. No Long Good Friday. You've probably seen it by now, but it's just so good. Next is Sonatine by Takeshi Kitano. Again, you can make the argument that Hanabai is the better film. That may be appearing later in the list. The Sonatine, I believe, was the first one that I saw of his films, and I saw it in a cinema in London. Again, when I used to go to the cinema. And it just blew me away. His use of the frame, his long takes, the explosions of violence, but realistic violence. His showing of the violence, but in the cut, so his films are more violent in your mind than they actually are. The lyrical quality, the whole episode on the beach, as these gangsters just sit about and waste time, essentially, is just beautiful and funny. I think after this I saw Violent Cop, which I love a lot as well. It was just so fresh. Yes, he used kind of traditional Japanese framing, and kind of longer shots. And again, I love the ending. You know, you can say Kitano doesn't have much range as an actor, but what he does so well. Yeah, it might not be his best film, that's arguable. But I do love Sonatine because it probably was the first one that I watched, the first one that I saw, and it had quite an impact. Because again, I think Kitano is underrated. I think he's better than... doesn't really get talked about as much as he should. Next is The Gunfighter by Henry King, or Die Scharfschütze. This is a German Blu-ray, as you may have guessed. I love this film, strangely enough, because it's in the top 150 favourites. It's only 85 minutes long, and you know what? It doesn't need to be any longer. If it was 110 minutes, it wouldn't be the same film. It's such a simple story. Gregory Peck plays Jimmy Ringo, the fastest gun in the West, who goes from town to town and pretty much gets challenged to shootouts with every punk that kind of recognises him or finds out that it's Jimmy Ringo, until he reaches this town where his wife lives, and he just wants to see his wife. He is being chased by the brothers of Richard Jackal, who he kills, spoiler alert, in the first 5 minutes of the film. And they want revenge, obviously, so they're chasing him, but he's waiting around to hear word whether his wife wants to see him, because he wants to see his son they haven't seen for years, because he spends his life being chased. Of course, it's another film about myths. You know, as the chatter around town, it's like, oh, he's killed 10 people, he's killed 15 people, he's killed 30 people. And again, there's always the punks who want to earn their name by taking down Jimmy Ringo, the fastest gun in the West. It's such an economical film. Like I said, it's only 85 minutes, doesn't need to be longer. Every shot counts, every frame counts. The ending, again, I seem to be banging on about endings, but endings in a film are quite important. It's got a brilliant ending. The way kind of, well, you should have seen this film. The way he kind of extends the curse, essentially, because that's what it is. And because all he wants to do is essentially retire, escape his life, and go take his wife and kid and live in a farm somewhere. But you know he can't do that, and he never will be able to do that. He's a doomed figure. Now, some of that is his own making, but then a lot of the people he's killed has been in self-defense because they've challenged him. It's not his fault he's the fastest gun in the West. For me, it's an essential Western. Again, nobody really talks about it. It's so economical, it's so simple, but it's just a beautiful little film. Great performance from Gregory Peck. Yeah, the Scharfschütze. And finally, you'll be glad to know, last on the list is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, by Stanley Kubrick. Obviously, Failsafe by Sidney Lumet, which has recently been released on Criterion Blu-ray, is a really good film. It's a very good film, but it's not the top. It's not my favourite 150. Dr. Strangelove is. Yes, this has another fantastic ending. Let's get that out of the way. It's just brilliant. The script is amazing. Peter Sellers, George C. Scott. Again, this is where I say I'm not the biggest George C. Scott fan, but I've got rather a lot of his films. Stellan Hayden is wonderful. And his Precious Fluids. Keenan Wynn, Slim Pickens, a very young James Earl Jones. I think this was his James Earl Jones' first film. It's just, you've all seen it, you all love it. There's not much point talking about it. You can't fight in here. This is a war room. Just the whole ridiculousness of the military. But again, it's a frightening, terrifying premise. But, you know, Vera Lynn's music, the ending, Peter Sellers' last speech as Dr. Strangelove, it's classic. Yeah, it should be in everybody's favourite 150 films list. Again, it's one of those films that's just about perfect. The way he kind of merges kind of newsreel documentary kind of shot footage with super stylized beautiful shots of the war room, just brilliant. I'm glad they didn't end it with a custard pie fight. I'm glad they ended it the way they did. Yeah, just one of Kubrick's masterpieces, Dr. Strangelove. And on that bombshell, literally, that's the end of part 4. So hopefully you'll join me for part 5, where I'll count down another 15 films from my favourite 150, not ranked. So please let me know in the comments below what you think of the films, if you've seen them, which one of the director's films that are shown are better and should be on the top 50, 150. Granted, some of them might be later. And thanks for watching. Thank you for the support. So this is Saul Ronan from Saul Ronan Films, saying farewell.